My name is Nicole Christensen. I am the president of Care Answered and the author of the book From Crisis to Calm. I am very proud to be able to have this presentation for you on protecting your most important assets. Um, Care Answered is a patient advocacy and care coordination agency. We help people navigate through the healthcare system at their most difficult times, and often when they're in a transition of care, either needing more care or a new diagnosis. But I'm really excited to bring this presentation to you and have wonderful presenters. So I'm going to get things started right now with Shaina Jones Magrone. She'll be speaking with us first about protecting our home. And she is the founder and managing attorney of Artisan Law, a client centered law firm that specializes in estate planning and business planning. Shana partners with her clients to help them create, protect, and transfer generational wealth. In her estate planning practice, Shana works with her clients on the dynamics of legacy creation that include planning for their assets, for intergenerational coordination, and for capturing the intangible aspects of a legacy that strengthen bonds beyond one's passing. And I will say that I've worked with Shana and she delivers all of those things. She's amazing. So I'm very excited to introduce Shana. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Nicole. That is so very kind coming from you. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm very excited to be here with you today. I'm going to just hop right into the presentation. I want to make sure that we get to the heart of the matter and that we have enough time for questions. So I'm just going to pull up my PowerPoint so we can really dig in. So today I'm going to be talking with you guys about deed fraud. I want to take the opportunity to talk with you about what it is and how you can protect yourself from it. So I'm not going to go much further into myself and my background. Nicole gave you just enough. I just want to say that I am a happy attorney. I'll be a 15-year practicing attorney this October. So super excited to be really doing what I love. Estate planning is amazing. And it allows me to do and connect with people around very important topics like deed fraud. So very happy to be talking with you about it and giving you some information on it. So I really think that stories can provide some of the best info and really bring a matter home. And so I want to give you all a couple of illustrative stories about deed fraud before I get into some more definitional concepts. Now, both of these stories come out of New York City. I'm a native Brooklynite. And oftentimes, as we've seen recently, some of those egregious cases come out of New York City. So these come from here, but I want to let you know that the concept or what's happening with deed fraud is really happening around the 5 boroughs as well as Long Island, as well as the other counties. So the first story is about a family named the Hembricks that owned a $1.5 million brownstone in Harlem. This was a brownstone that had been in their family for 3 generations, owned since 1945. And at the time that the deed fraud happened in their family, there was an 84-year-old mom and a 65-year-old son in the home. It had previously been purchased by her parents. And so the story is this. At some point in 2014, they received notice from the finance department in New York that their deed had been transferred. Now, they hadn't engaged in any deed transfer, so they ignored it. Then over the course of several months, they started to receive visits from the police banging on their door, saying that break-ins had occurred and there were burglars in the home. They assured the police every time that nothing was happening, everything was fine, they were living in their home and no one was there, other than those who should be there. And then they started to receive banging on their door from goons who are attempting to forcefully put them out of their home, saying that they no longer live there, they no longer owned it. And so here's what had occurred. Over a course of 2 to 3 years, a series of scammers had created several deeds, filed with the New York City Finance Department, filed with ACRIS. They had had several deeds rejected, and they kept going back again and again until they got the information correct, so that they transferred this home out from under this family with no knowledge. It was at that time that the family then employed the help of an attorney, and they are still engaging in the process of unraveling this fraudulent transfer. So that's the Hembrick story out of Harlem. And we're going to come back to these concepts, but what has happened to them and in the next story that I'm going to talk with you about really does encompass some of the main parts of what happens in a deed fraud matter. So the next family I want to talk with you about is the Biases. Now, this is a family out of Brooklyn. I'm a native Brooklynite. This is out of Bed-Stuy. And this was a $1.2 million brownstone that had also been in a family for about 80 years. And in this matter, the family had been going through some financial challenges. They were possibly on the brink of a foreclosure, and they received some information from companies that set themselves up, or scammers that set themselves up as an LLC, claiming that they were able to help them with a quote unquote loan modification. And these were unsophisticated, buyers, unsophisticated homeowners, actually in both of those situations. And because the family was in financial distress, they didn't have the means or didn't know to employ a trusted advisor or have any additional friends or family help them through the process, sign these loan modification papers, which actually were deed transfer papers. That company then took that paperwork, that fraudulent paperwork, and also presented that fraudulent paperwork to a bank, as well as New York City Finance Department, to transfer that home out from under that family. And they are also now engaged in litigation in order to unravel that fraudulent transfer. So I give you those stories because I do think that they provide a lot of the salient facts that you will find in a lot of deed fraud cases. But before I go any further, I really just want to define it for you. So deed fraud is also known as title theft. And it occurs when a scammer or a series of scammers will take title to someone's home without the owner's knowledge, or they'll do it by obtaining title to the home under misleading conditions or coercing an unsuspecting homeowner. And so after taking the title, the scammer will then sell the property to a third party. They'll engage in various tactics in order to evict the actual homeowners from the home. And they'll pocket the proceeds from that sale. They will often use false names or several false names and or front companies. And when we say front companies, meaning setting up LLCs specifically for the purpose of engaging in deed theft, right? They're not for legitimate construction companies, legitimate home flipping companies. It's specifically for these purposes. And it is generally LLCs because LLCs tend to be one of the most favorable entity types in order to engage in real estate transactions. So when you see deed fraud, you really see three main types. So there's a refinance model. And in that model, the scammer will often target a homeowner. And these are generally elderly people that they're targeting, with the assumption that the elderly will be isolated, that the elderly will not be fully cognizant or understanding of what the documents are that are presented in front of them, may not ask for help. So they'll present those documents, or they'll target that homeowner. They'll find someone who may be having issues with mortgage payments or taxes, and they'll offer to refinance the property as they did in the Biases case. And they'll often give them an offer that sounds really too good to be true. So an interest rate that's just amazing and off the charts, or just refinance terms that just normally wouldn't make any sense. And by taking advantage of the homeowner's lack of knowledge and using crafty paperwork fraudulent paperwork, they'll lure the homeowner into signing those documents and really giving away title to the property under the premise of a refinance. The second main type of deed fraud is the absentee landlord model. So in this case, a scammer will troll property records, or they'll look at surrogates court records. So one of the things that I'm sure you're aware of is that, of course, property records are public knowledge. At least in New York, they are. In some states, they're not. But property records are public knowledge, and surrogates court records. So individuals who have passed away and are going through probate, those records will be public knowledge as well. And so they'll look for properties where the owner may either be an absentee landlord in the case of property records, or the person is deceased in case of surrogates court records, and there are no known heirs. And so there's just a property sitting out there vacant. They'll then file a phony deed or a series of phony deeds with the finance department until they get it right, and they'll have that property transferred over to them. Oftentimes they may claim to be an heir of a deceased person, or they may claim to have some other form of relationship to a person who's on a property roll. The last main type is the identity theft model. So this happens when a scammer or a scammer and their crew will go through a homeowner's records, right? They'll go through their trash. They may find discarded utility bills or other forms of identifying information. And they'll use that identifying information to steal the homeowner's identity. And then they'll do something like open up a HELOC, a home equity line of credit. They then won't make the payments on the HELOC, and the home will then go into foreclosure. And all the time, of course, the records for the HELOC, the payments from the bank, or the payment statements from the bank will be going to the scammer's address. They're picking up the mail. They're, of course, not making the payments. Months are going by. The homeowner has no idea what's happening until they actually receive foreclosure documentation, or the sheriff actually shows up for foreclosure. So here are some shocking statistics. So most of these shocking statistics, really the majority of the cases of deed fraud come out of New York City, but that does not mean, and I have some news for you, particularly about, Nassau and Suffolk County, it's happening out there as well. But what we know is that between 2014 and 2020, in New York City, the finance department has received over 3,000 cases of deed fraud. So over 3,000 cases of homeowners having their homes fraudulently stolen out from under them. Approximately 45% of those cases are from my home borough, Brooklyn. And what we also know is that these scammers overwhelmingly target Black and brown residents in gentrifying neighborhoods. We have cases of deed fraud in Nassau and Suffolk County, but what I will say is that some of the most prominent cases indicate that these scammers are actually coming from Long Island. So let me say this also about what I've seen on Long Island and the research that I've seen. What is actually occurring in Nassau and Suffolk County now is residents will receive a document, something like this as a property profile company. And it will be from a company indicating that, they'll give an offer to purchase a deed. They'll have identifying information that they can find generally from public records. And they'll provide the homeowner with the opportunity to purchase a deed, which is often at sometimes 1,000% of what it normally costs in order to get a certified record of a deed. So, there's a couple of consequences with that particular scam that's happening on Long Island. So first, you have a homeowner that may purchase that deed and, of course, is scammed out of their money for something that they can easily get from the county clerk's office for a fraction of the cost. But then you also have a homeowner verifying personal information to a scam company that can then be later used by that company or people to whom they may sell that record for further scams down the line. So now I want to talk about some overall consequences of deed fraud in general, and particularly those three main types that I identified. So of course you have the illegal loss of property, which functionally means eviction. It means that people are out on the streets or they're moving in with relatives in ways that they never considered. It means the theft and loss of generational wealth, because I'm sure that we can all be clear that homes for many people are their largest asset. It is the asset that they pass down to their children or other loved ones that is then either kept in the family or used as an asset to collateralize other sorts of ventures, sold to reap the money from it and invest in other ways or whatever it is. But it's a theft and a loss of that money. And of course, it's also costly and time consuming for legal action. It often takes many more years to unravel these deed theft cases, these deed fraud cases, than it took to actually put them in place. And that's time and stress on the family, it's time and stress on the legal system, and it's absolutely costly from a financial perspective to undertake. So what to do if you're a victim? So of course, you really are going to want to contact an attorney. You're going to want to file a complaint. In New York, our Attorney General, Letitia James, out here doing some amazing things. But one of the things that she's done with deed fraud is, because she recognizes how critical of an issue it is in New York, is she's created a specific initiative called the Protect Our Homes Initiative. There's a phone number and email, as well as an online complaint form for anyone who feels that they've been a victim or a target of deed fraud. I'm also going to get to in a little bit, specifically in the boroughs and in the counties, some particular ways that you can protect yourself. So I want to talk about that in these practical tips. So I always believe that an ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. And I believe that because when I started my legal career, I was actually a trial attorney. And as a trial attorney, I get to take the understanding of how not to get into the legal system. I take that to my clients. And oftentimes it's doing things to avoid getting to the crisis point that are going to be the best for you, right? So things to do that in this case are to check your property deed records at least once a year. You can do that in the boroughs with ACRIS. You can sign up to be notified if there are recorded documents against your deed. You can do that. You receive that in the city automatically or in the boroughs automatically. In Nassau County, there is a property fraud alert that you can receive. And in Suffolk County, there's a homeowners watch list. So you want to make sure that the details of your deed are correct. And then you also want to contact the finance department or the applicable department in Nassau and Suffolk counties if you stop receiving your property tax bills, so on and so forth, EPA bills, right? Because that's an indication that something's going wrong. Because the city and the counties are going to get their money. You also, of course, want to create a proper estate plan for the transfer of your property to the next generation so that you're not ending up in surrogate's court and potentially being trolled that way. And then, of course, once the property is inherited, the next generation needs to update your deed. So that's all I've got. Happy to answer any questions that you all have once we get to that portion of the talk.
That was fabulous. Thank you very, very much for that. One of the things I just want to add a little bit is, or just to let you know how this came about, is Shana and I were talking and she mentioned deed fraud. And quite honestly, it was the first time I had heard of it. And I found it horrific, as I'm sure you guys do too. And I'm always of the opinion if one person doesn't know about something, then there are probably lots of other people that don't know about it. And information is wealth. And so I really thank you for presenting that. And then since of course, one thing begets another thing, I've seen in my home county of Nassau County
If I
all of
ever
this
lose my battle to
information.
depression.
Oh, oh, something's happening. I that that I've seen things about deed fraud. So I'm presuming that it is unfortunately on the up. So as much as we can help and lead people to where they can get the information and protect themselves is so, so important. Um, I don't see any questions in the chat. If you want to take yourself off mute and you had a question, please do so.
Yeah, I have a question. Can you give us that 800 number again for, when you talking about Letitia James? You said there's an 800 number to call if you wanted to file like a case with fraud.
Sure. So the 800 number for the Protect Our Homes initiative is 1-800-771-7755.
Now, is that for all of New York or just New York City?
This is a statewide initiative.
Okay, it's
So it's from the Attorney General's office.
So if you have like, you're signed up with Equifax and, those 3 other organizations that are out there that kind of like credit organizations, would they notify you if there's an issue with credit or loans taken out? I mean, sometimes like we get notifications from them
So
if you're signed up, or you don't.
So
Or you may not know
Equifax,
that.
Experian, and TransUnion are credit monitoring agencies. So I'm of course, if you have some form of a home-based loan product, a mortgage, a HELOC, something like that, and payments are not being made, and they're linked to your account, you'll receive a notification. But when you're dealing with the identity theft scam, the mortgage or the HELOC is not taken out in your name; it's taken out in the scammer successor. So that may not appear on your credit at all. And of course, the credit monitoring companies are not deed monitoring companies. So I don't necessarily think that that's going to be the best place to go or think that you're going to receive information about this.
No, this is pretty scary stuff. It's like,
Yeah.
because people actually come to your home in your mailbox and get your mail. I mean,
That's right.
it's crazy. And then they can even change the address. No, you can't change the address, but I'm just saying people go to
Yeah,
your
indeed.
mailbox. That's what's scary, and take out.
Yeah. So, I mean, I would definitely suggest just on both of those things, Bonnie, of course, if you're going away for a long period of time, make sure that your mail is collected by someone who's trusted to you or have it held at the post office. And then, of course, definitely those, the Nassau County and the Suffolk County agencies that will provide you with updates about any recorded documents against your deed, sign up for those. And check your deed on a regular basis. It's very easy to check your own deed and see what's going on with the title.
I think that goes along with York's question on how does the fraud alert work in Nassau County. She put up some information about how to take care of that. Do you have it offhand for Nassau County, Shaina? Do you have it in front
So
of you?
there's a link in a website. I'm happy to, I can just go grab it and put it in the box.
Okay, that would be great.
Yeah,
If you could put it in the
sure.
chat, that would be great. Kimberly,
Yep.
did you have a question too?
Yeah, I was going to say, first of all, thank you for this. This is so important, extremely powerful. I see this, unfortunately, far too often. And I worked with a young lady who handles title searches. They do the title search when you're going to purchase a property and the like. And they have a service whereby they actually will search all the ownership on the property, make sure that the deed, the title, everything is clean, and then certify it, meaning that they take everything that they've done and certified. Something happens down the line, you can go back to that to show that no, this is how the deed was, and clearly it's been altered. So yeah, it's a little scary to know that this is going on. There's a lot going on. Thank you, Shaina. Extremely powerful.
Yeah, and thank you for all of the tips on how to protect ourselves so that we don't become a statistic in there. And thanks for the Nassau County. It's up on chat if anybody was
Sure.
asking. So now I want to introduce our next presenter, um, who is Peter Janowsky. He's going to be talking a little bit more about protecting our money, which is crucial. So Peter Janowsky is the managing director at Ryan and Janowsky Financial Strategies Group and specializes in retirement plans and endowment management. Peter studied to become a retirement planning 401k specialist while working with Morgan Stanley. With 26 years of experience in the financial service industry, Peter brings with him a unique set of qualifications. Recently, Peter became an accredited investment fiduciary. He also focuses working with seniors and their families and has vast experience working with attorneys. At Ryan and Janowsky Financial Strategies Group, they take special care to plan holistically and logically to ensure what is most important for you and your family will be in place for today and tomorrow. So again, I when we do these webinars, I really love working with the people I do because they're part of what I call the Care Answered family. People that I trust, that have worked with my clients, that have worked together. And so, Peter, please take it away.
Thanks so much, and thanks for the introduction. And I'm going to be a little holistic. I'm going to jump around a few different topics because obviously I can take up a lot of time if I wanted to. And I'm actually going to pick up from where Shaina left off on a couple of things. And as Bonnie said, I was surprised too at the amount of cases that happened in New York City. But I used to do, well, I still do on occasion. I used to do a presentation called Project Safe: Seniors Against Financial Exploitation. And my late partner and I did a lot of these presentations. And the rules that we told everybody were the same rules you already know about. Everybody should have a shredder. So when you say, that people are getting information from discarded bills, listen, we have to be accountable for ourselves. We have to have a shredder. That's number one. No paper should ever go out. Nothing is ever done over the phone. I should say almost nothing is done on the phone. Never give out information on the phone. There's the grandparent scam. There's so many scams. Everybody's picked up the phone, I'm sure, in the last few years and had the Social Security scam and IRS scam. They're obvious. The other thing is email scams. Never give any information out through an email. In fact, in my industry, we are not allowed to communicate anything specific, whether it's an investment decision, transfer of money. Everything has to be substantiated by a phone call. So I just had I'm changing my routine a little bit because I didn't realize that the identity theft part and the D theft was going to talk a little bit about the stealing information from bills. But it makes a lot of sense that everybody should have a shredder. We all have to look out for ourselves. We have to be our own advocate with protection, just like everything else. Speaking of the protection, one of the things my industry has been advocating strongly for a few years is asking our clients to have something called a trusted contact. And that trusted contact theory could also work well to protect yourself against something like the deed theft. Because like Shaina was saying, in one of the cases, I think it was a mortgage refinance company and people didn't know what they were signing. So a trusted contact is really nothing more than a second set of eyes. And it could be anyone. It could be a family member. It could be a neighbor. It's somebody that you trust. And as we age and as seniors go through life, unfortunately, their world may shrink a little bit and may be harder to get this trusted contact. So it could be a neighbor, it could be a friend. And the trusted contact should be allowed to see everything. They can get duplicate statements in the mail. It could be duplicate bank statements, duplicate brokerage statements. They could get confirmations. They may want access to certain websites to check a person's account. They may want to go on meetings to meet with someone like Shaina, or if somebody's doing a big change in their life, like refinancing or something, that second set of eyes should be there. It's in place to protect the person, the investor, whoever it is. It's also in place to protect people like me. And I'll give you a quick story. A while back, I was referred to a client from an attorney, and it was a typical sad situation where a spouse had to go into a facility, and all of a sudden, everything went upside down. Big change in life. We don't know where the checkbook is. We don't know where that is, and piles of papers this high on the kitchen table. And when I met this person for the first time, there was a trusted contact there, and I was pleasantly surprised. And I told the client that it made me feel more comfortable because this trusted contact may ask certain questions that the client would not ordinarily come up with. So it works on both sides of it. So it was pretty interesting. Shaina used a word before called transition, and what I'd like to talk about right now for a second is a very important concept to keep in mind to protect assets when there's transition. I like to use the word change. The only constant in life is change, and it's going to happen. No matter what anybody says, there's going to be change in our life. Hopefully, it's always for the good, but there's a lot of challenging changes that come up as we age. The whole point of listening to things like this and working with an attorney like Shaina is to prepare for the unexpected. How do we prepare for the unexpected? We can expect it. How do we do that? We have proper documents in place. We go to an elder law attorney, and we make sure that we have that living will. We name the healthcare proxy. We might need trust. We may not need trust. But doing nothing is a choice, and it's usually a poor choice. And it comes to just about everything, like protecting investments. And especially today, especially this year so far, with the markets being in such turmoil, a regular review of somebody you're working with might be a good idea right now. These are conversations that we have to have with family, with the attorney, and usually the most uncomfortable conversations are usually the most important ones. And nobody wants to talk about certain things that help protect us, whether it could be life insurance, long-term care insurance, whatever it is, and a will, and figuring out who gets what. It could get sticky. I get it, family situations. But again, putting your head in the sand doesn't make sense either. So going back to like protecting assets as far as investments go, there's nothing wrong with ever having a second opinion. And I think we're in a very trying time right now. It's a little appropriate to talk about this because of what's going on in the markets and the bond market and mortgage rates and everything else. We had a long period since the financial crisis in 2008 and 9 where the market was doing just fine. And it was very easy for people to do everything on their own, just put their money in the S&P fund. It never goes down. Hearing all these things. Well, right now we're in the middle of a wake-up call. The stock market's down almost 19% year to date. People got crushed on bonds as well, which is fixed income. And it brings me back to almost along the lines of a trusted contact. Watching things is something called suitability. So when we go back to the word transition and change, again, as we age, this is going to sound morbid, but there's losses as we age, just loss in life. It's a fact of life. And many times when somebody loses a spouse, I've seen it too often where a financial advisor or a family member or something will come in and change too many things too quickly. And I've always said that, if it was good enough while they were alive, then why does it have to change immediately now? And I could pinpoint stories like that, too many of them, where a spouse passes away and all of a sudden the survivor is buying annuities. And you know what? It may or may not be appropriate, but why such a big change? That's where we have to take accountability, and we have to again be our own advocate. So at the end of the day, trying to prepare for the unexpected is the most difficult thing. But taking that first step and having that difficult conversation, putting things in place is what's most important. And we have to ask ourselves, what is truly most important? So are we preparing for ourselves now for the next 5-10 years? Or are we preparing for the next generation? Or both? Or none of it all? And everybody's different. There's no cookie cutter approach. And there are certain things, like, again, I don't want to go like into too many financial parts of it, because I really believe this is much more conceptual and, believe it or not, emotional about it. But there are certain things in place these days that can protect one's assets that are, for lack of a better term, are products or certain investment things. There are exchange traded funds with downside protection. There are annuities that offer downside protection. There's long-term care insurance that may be fitting, but no one's going to know if it's right for them until they take that first plunge and start investigating it properly. That's pretty much it, unless there's questions.
Thank you so much, Peter. Very helpful. Does again, I don't see any questions in the chat, but if somebody has some questions that they would like to verbalize now for Peter, please do so. All right. You were pretty comprehensive. Um, okay, well, I will kind of be the tail end of our webinar. And as I mentioned, and as you probably know, I'm a patient advocate. So I'm going to be talking about protecting your health as well as potentially your wealth. So what we're talking about, what I'm going to talk about first is medical bills and things you should know. As you may know, in the past few months, I've been in, the New York Times and have been on local Fox News regarding billing in particular, or how those bills happen for hospitals as well as for individuals, um, and that how those financial bills that can appear. So there are some calls that I've received lately, and I want to share with you a few brief stories so that you can kind of contextualize it and potentially help yourself and your loved ones as well as your clients. So a family reached out to me recently about a hospitalization. It was a mom, and she was very weak. She couldn't get up. She called 911. The ambulance appropriately took her to the hospital. She stayed in the hospital for 2 days upon doctor's recommendation. She came home, was feeling a little bit better, but definitely has now more uh, health related issues to deal with. And then a few weeks later, they got a bill for $30,000. So by the time they contacted me, they'd already appealed it once and was denied. They were devastated. They thought that their mom had good insurance, and in fact, she did. And the doctors told them that she needed to stay there. So what was going on? They called me. They were stressed about that, of course, with that many zeros on a number of a bill that you didn't know that you would have is very stressful on top of your medical issues. They wanted to know if I could help and did they need a lawyer? The answer turned out to be yes, I could help, and no, at that point they didn't need a lawyer. So after a brief conversation, it seemed to me that the diagnosis and the code related to it were incongruent, right? So the treatment wasn't covered because of the diagnosis code that was given, um, but they didn't align. So my initial thoughts was to call the hospital and explain that to them. In plain English, we're seeing this. They're saying they're not covering it, but this is not what we were told the diagnosis was. Is there some sort of situation here? Um, and then maybe a half hour later, I got a grateful call back saying that they had called the hospital. They did. They said they see this a lot and they were going to fix it. So remedied. But there are two takeaways from this story. First, always take a look at the documents, right? All the documents that you get. It's very stressful to see a bill like that, as I said, but you generally only get two appeals, so you need to make them count. And the obvious rebuttal for for this family was, this isn't right. This should get paid. The doctor said that she should be there. Done. But that's not a good rebuttal for an appeal. Um, I always say I'm not a lawyer, but I watch TV. So, it's like the same kind of, if you think about it, um, in that context, when you watch TV even, and there's a rebuttal that makes sense with whatever statement was made. And so if you don't know what statement's being made, it's hard to then bring the proof that it's wrong. So take a look at it before you make your appeal. And so what if it doesn't make sense, definitely call an advocate and we can look at it before you submit your appeal. It's again hard to win an appeal if you don't understand what the viewpoint or the backing is. Um, Another billing question that I get is often at the doctor's office. Same kind of thing. Why is this charge here? What does it mean? How come I've never seen it before when I've had this same treatment or this same test before? Again, this could be a simple, there's there's humans everywhere. All of us are human and there's mistakes that can be made. So again, check your insurance and the coverage. One thing I do want to state is sometimes people will call and they're confusing an explanation of benefits with a bill. So explanation of benefits is really just that. It's an explanation of benefits. If you don't have a bill from the healthcare institution or doctor, then it's not really a bill yet. So, sometimes that relieves a burden because sometimes that number can seem really high, but that's not a bill. So always look at that first so you don't get your heart palpitating for no reason. Um, and then it you can ask the doctor's office if this isn't covered, just ask and say, why did this test take place? Maybe it's something that you really needed and it's not covered. But oftentimes I see when people call that there's just some sort of coding issue that needs to be rectified. Um, if it's not legitimately covered under the insurance, then there's definitely ways that you can lessen the bill potentially. So either just make sure that the clinician isn't charging you their no insurance rate. So sometimes, just like the explanation of benefits, I'm just going to make round numbers. So say a blood test costs $100, but they only charge your insurance $50, or basically the insurance is only going to pay $50. So if you do find that you have to pay it, talk to them and make sure that you're paying a $50 rate, not the $100 rate. And also, if I see so often people that get medical bills, the least ability to pay it are the people that pay it. And so nobody should be, losing their house, not being able to put food in their mouths or in their family's mouths or not have gas for car because of a medical bill that you could potentially talk down to a payment that, as little as it is, that you can make it as small as you can so that you're not struggling and suffering because at that point, you know, they want to get something rather than nothing. So the other thing with that is that there have been some policy changes, which are good. So I have some good news. Is that we probably already know that medical bills are one of the leading causes of bankruptcy. So they're also the most common collection item on people's credit reports, or used to be, and show up on 43 million credit reports. About 1 in 5 households report that they have unpaid medical bills. But beginning July 1st of this year, paid medical bills will no longer be included on credit reports, going back to what we're talking about, credit reports. And unpaid bills will be reported only if they have been remain unpaid for at least 12 months. So that is also good news. Additionally, companies announced that starting July 2023, so less than a year, they will not include information furnished to them on medical bills in collection for amounts of 500 or less. So this is good news, and just know that so that you have time, and please investigate things. If something doesn't look right, it might not be right. So people should have that knowledge behind them to back them. And again, all of these situations that we're talking about are generally when people are already stressed out, probably have some sort of medical issue. So just take a breath and just realize that there may be other options, or it could just be a mistake. There's also the No Surprise Act that's been in place since January 1st, 2022. You may have protections there, so you should not receive unexpected bills for emergency services received from a healthcare provider or facility that you didn't know was out of network until you were billed. So this had happened a lot. This was in place for Medicare folks before, but it's new for all insurances now. So what would happen is people would go into the hospital, a plastic surgeon came in, they just presumed, the hospital took their insurance that this would be under there, and then months later, sometimes they would get a bill for thousands upon thousands of dollars because that person, that plastic surgeon wasn't in network. So now that can't happen there because of this act. Um, and if you don't have health insurance, or if you pay care without using your health insurance, your provider must give you a good faith estimate of how much your care will cost before you get care. Afterward, if the billed amount is $400 or more above the estimate, you may be able to dispute the charges through patient-provider dispute resolution process. So that's in place as well. And with all of these protections that are in place, and things that we talk about regarding billing, your health is wealth, right? So the other things, and Peter mentioned this too, and I know Shaina works a lot with it. It's about having these conversations with your healthcare proxies. God forbid you become incapacitated, to know what you would want. They also need to know what's going on with your health. A lot of times, we've all seen it. Those in this profession have seen people make a healthcare proxy, leave it with their lawyer's office, never even talk to their healthcare proxy about what their wishes are, or the healthcare proxy doesn't know their medical information. This shouldn't be the case, because then they're making uninformed decisions. Your healthcare proxy is there to make your decision, not their decision. Your decision based on your conversations and the knowledge of your medical information. So important. And we provide that at Care Answered as well. We walk through the conversation as well as fill out the healthcare proxy, or we love to work with your lawyer to help facilitate that conversation. And when those forms are done, we can help place it into your portal, your doctor's portal, your patient portal, as well as you will have it in a QR code, you'll have it a card, so that God forbid you are incapacitated and hospitalized, they can scan it right there and it'll know who your healthcare proxy is. But in the world of portals, it's also so important to use your patient portals. I know that's also a pain, right? Because we have different portals, different healthcare systems, different parts of our body, but they can be immensely helpful. They can save your life. There have been more times than I'd care to mention that folks had in their, again, humans, we're all human and we do make mistakes. But for whatever reason, their diagnosis was inaccurate in their portal, or their medications were inaccurate. And then it goes from this to that to the other, all these different doctors or these health care systems with wrong information. And next thing you know, you're taking a medication that you should not be taking and can hurt you tremendously. Or you're being treated for something that you don't have. So important, and it's also a really great way to communicate with your healthcare provider. So you don't have to wait the next 3 months until you have your doctor's appointment. You can message them. Some are better than others, true, but they tend to get back to you at some point, and answer your questions. And if you have concerns, you can make them known quicker. We work with that too. We have a HIPAA portal at Care Answered, so that you can have all your portals in one, and we can advocate and coordinate your care with our help as an advocate. Or if you just want to make sure all the family members, healthcare proxies are on the same page, we can set it up like that. But either way, whatever tool you use, This is really important to protect your health and your money as far as medical bills are concerned. So I know I probably spoke quickly. That's the New Yorker in me. But if you have, does anybody have any questions on that?
I just wanted to thank you, Nicole, for putting this together because the information was super valuable. Two things, you answered one of them, and that was, I have a friend whose husband had a heart attack. He was transported to 3 different hospitals. The bills were through the roof. None of the doctors were in plan, and she's been fighting with them forever.
Oh no.
I think she's just decided she's not going to pay them, but so you touch on something. What is it that individuals can do? Emergency situation, to your point, we don't know who that doctor is and how he is set up in relationship to our plan. Is there anything that can be done in advance? And I know this sounds crazy, but like if I want to go to a specialist, I have to ask my insurance company, can I?
Mm-hmm.
Right? How can that be put on the doctors as well? And I understand it's an emergency, but I don't know. I would think there's, some way of knowing, well, that doctor, he's a great doctor, but he's not in plan, but we're going to use him anyway, and then reveal it to the client. I don't know. Just a question.
No, that's a completely valid and great question. So, again, with the No Surprise Act, that shouldn't really be happening if I'm understanding you correctly. So if you're going to a regular hospital and the person that they called in is out of network, there should not be a surprise bill. That should not be happening. The other thing is I have heard of stories because I work with folks that only do for big cases, and this might be a good one for them. In which people traveled, they had insurance. And I blogged about this a while ago, but they had insurance. They were traveling outside. They were traveling here, but they lived somewhere in another country. But they had their traveler's insurance. They did everything right. And then they had their child with them, and they fell. And so the hospital off the bed or something, it ended up not being anything, thank God. But because of the nature of the fall, that apparently it was suggested by the ambulance, I guess, for them to go to this hospital that was nearby. And thank you, Dr. Hatwood. So then they went there and it was a trauma hospital. And so then it wasn't covered. And so the bill was tremendous, and they fought it, and but it was a hard fight. But generally speaking, and again, this was before the No Surprise Act. So generally speaking, they should have a pretty good case to say, no, we're not paying this exorbitant amount. But I have to look at it to
that's
see.
what she did, because that's what they told her the reasoning was because it was out of network. And she said, did anyone ask my husband if it was okay? And
the
he was
other
in the process of dying, right?
Oh my God, so
Yeah.
horrible.
So
So
she's like,
one of the other things, just to avoid any, because sometimes I say don't pay, but I don't mean just don't pay and forget about it. Sometimes the best advocate, even before the No Surprise, is the insurance company themselves, and say what is going on. I know I've had that with my clients, and even with myself. I called the insurance company. I'm like, what is this craziness?
right,
And they fought it, and it was kind of like the same thing I had mentioned before, so that they're not charged the actual amount. They're charged much less as if you had insurance. So it's like a
right,
copay
right.
amount.
Okay.
So
It's good
sometimes
to
that's a
know.
really good way to go. Yeah,
Right.
thanks for asking, Kimberly.
Yeah, thank you. And I'm sorry, I have a hard stop. I have to drop, but this was phenomenal. Thank you so much, Nicole. I have to attend more of your webinars because there's so much valuable information.
Thank you so much, Kimberly, and
So,
thank you all for
Nicole,
attending. Yes,
Nicole, I have a
Patty.
quick question. That new
Sure.
act that you were talking about, what is that? How does that protect people? Again, if you could just go over that, where no surprise.
The No Surprise Bill is exactly what kind of Kimberly was describing.
Right.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. I know you probably have to leave. And this is taped, so we'll send it to you. So what happens is if you go to the hospital and they call in a doctor that's out of network. Sometimes all of their specialists are out of network. That's what they used to do in some of these institutions. And there was a big lawsuit, a class action lawsuit that was happening as well. And so then they would get a bill later for thousands upon thousands of dollars telling you after the fact, you're home now, that that doctor that treated you was out of network, and therefore you have to pay them this astronomical amount of money. So now, as the law stipulates, with any insurance, it hit for Medicare, the no surprise for Medicare a while ago, but just January for all other insurances, and this is nationwide, um, that they can't do that. They can't give you a surprise bill of thousands of dollars. Maybe you'll pay for the work as if your insurance was paying, but they can't send you these astronomical bills. I'm not
So
saying it's
just
never happening, but fight
one
it.
quick story. My husband had surgery like a number of years ago. So
Mhm.
the hospital was covered with the insurance, his doctor, but you never know who your anesthesiologist is at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So he gets his anesthesiologist. He doesn't know, he's not covered under the insurance, but how do you even know who your anesthesiologist is?
You don't.
And he gets this humongous bill. And then so what happens is he calls the doctor's office. He's like, this is crazy. How, I didn't even know, I wouldn't have gotten someone out of network. Well, they say you have no control over the anesthesiologist. But
Correct.
then they came up with this 2 out of 3 rule with the insurance that said if your hospital and your doctor is covered under your plan, the anesthesiologist, that's the number third, even if they're not in covered, they're covered, which
Right.
who would even know that? Who even
Right.
know 2 out of the 3 rule? It's like, he didn't know, it's the doctor's office that said, oh, wait a second, you could be covered out of the 2 out of 3 rule. It was like, how would I know that?
Right. You wouldn't. You wouldn't.
It's like,
So anytime you get a bill that's crazy, again, your own clinician can be your advocate, your insurance can be an advocate, and obviously an advocate can be an advocate. But don't just pay it blindly, and or just don't even let it stress you out, because generally, again, people have had some sort of operation or they're ill in some way. You don't need that extra stress if it can be figured out relatively quickly. So just know that there's help out there.
okay, well, thank you, all our speakers. That was great, Shaina and Peter and Nicole.
Thank you. Thanks so
Have a
much for
great day,
joining us.
everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Appreciate it.
Bye.
Thanks, Mary Beth. Let's stop the recording. Where's the